Hello, everybody. My name is Desi Saran, and I'll be your host today for Restaurant Innovation, where we are building the future of hospitality and technology. So, today we're going to talk about a hot topic of debate, which is the gigantic problem between commercial real estate landlords and tenants. So, as you know, right now, COVID-19 has hit the United States and all over the world pretty hard. In the United States alone, there has been thousands and thousands of restaurant closures, okay, whether it's temporary or permanent. A lot of the local governments are enacting restrictions which allow no indoor dining, or you can only open if you're an essential versus non-essential business, right? And what we're seeing is a domino effect of restaurants that cannot keep their doors open. So we're seeing restaurants transition from temporarily closed to permanently closed. And we're seeing big chains and corporations filing for bankruptcy left and right. There's a lot of data that's published showing that, or stating with projections that by the end of the year, 25 to 33% of all restaurants will close permanently by the end of the year. That number is staggering. It's extremely scary, knowing that a lot of the restaurant industry will not survive. And this is affecting every type of restaurant, from independents to chains to large companies such as Starbucks, McDonald's. Right? You know, it's bad when Starbucks is closing 200 locations or more. I believe it's 400 at this point. I think McDonald's is 200 locations. Dunkin' Donuts is 600. I just read somewhere that Ruby Tuesday will close 125 out of their 400 locations, right? So about 25% of all of their restaurants. Think about a lot of these legacy brands that we love that we'll never be able to go back to. And, you know, the other challenge is that a lot of independent restaurants where it's one location, it's a mom and pop operator, they're really in trouble, right? They don't have the resources and capacity to withstand this. They don't have cash in the bank. They don't have investors. So we're going to see an onslaught of the entire industry, especially independents, fold right now. You know, when you look at the types of restaurants that will survive, full service restaurant is in trouble. You know, with full service, when you have waiters and hosts and chefs and busboys, there's just too much overhead. And when you're restricted to only outdoor dining, it's just not enough to compensate, right? So full service, you know, it's looking like an endangered species right now. What the data is showing is that quick service or fast casual has the best chances of survival. Think about like your Chipotle. A lot of these restaurant concepts have transitioned into pick up and take out only, right? And that's been the wave of the future. Consumers want their food fast. A lot of it is transitioning into off-premise. So it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic of how the landscape of the restaurant industry changes, especially in the upcoming months. What we have, right, as of September 2020, we are now entering 6 months into a pandemic. You know, you're seeing very high rates of unemployment. You're seeing a lot of restaurant closures, which is causing permanent job loss. And a lot of these unemployed people cannot get their jobs back, which means they won't have disposable income to spend in restaurant or retail in the upcoming months. So what does that mean? This means this is putting more gasoline on the fire, basically, right? If people don't have disposable income, they don't spend money in our stores. Our retail and brick and mortar hurt even more. And we're going to see an even higher amount of defaults and bankruptcies and closures in the wintertime. So my predictions and my projections are that as things get closer to the election, you know, we're going to see a lot more turmoil and craziness going on. I believe that the government will enact more stimulus to help small businesses, but I think it's going to be a little bit too late. They are working on the HEROES Act right now, which they went into recess, and Congress will reconvene after Labor Day. I think it's going to take a few weeks until they pass the HEROES Act, which means they'll enact a PPP round 2, and businesses won't be able to apply for that probably until late September, October. Hopefully, best case scenario is that we wouldn't see money for those who are eligible until October, November. At that time, businesses need money now. So the restaurant industry is going to take a lot of damage in the next coming months. This segment, today's episode, will focus on what to do with your landlords, right? And it's been an interesting dynamic over the past 6 months with trying to keep your lights open and dealing with, paying rent to your landlord. So we're going to discuss how to look over your lease, how to negotiate an agreement with your landlord, and how to keep that agreement open. Because once you negotiate something, it's subject to change anytime. These are unprecedented times where things can change. You might be forced to shut down. So you need to be able to protect yourself and the landlord as well. They need to be able to protect themselves as well. All right. So as you're going through your lease, let's go over some of the most basic terms of the lease, right? When you sign a lease, your landlord may give you TI, also known as tenant improvement. So, you may negotiate an amount that may go towards your build out and your construction, right? Your landlord may give you $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 that goes towards your construction in the beginning when you sign the lease, right? Now, what does that mean? That means that your landlord is kind of buying in with you and they're helping you with the construction to get open and ready. I've done deals where they give that to us up front, but it's usually after we complete construction. So we have to open up, we have to complete construction, we have to pay our contractors already. And usually there might be more stipulations where our contractors have to sign paperwork, and then that money is issued to us. I've also done creative deals and negotiated deals where that money is credited towards us in terms of rent, right? So we may get a credit of $50,000 over the course of a year where I don't even pay any type of rent at all, which is great. Now, for those of you that are opened up and have had your restaurants opened up for a while now, this doesn't really apply to you. For those of you that are trying to open up right now or thinking about opening up a restaurant in the future, this is something to think about, and think about how to structure something that's a bit more creative, right? And putting things in place to help protect you from COVID. God forbid anything happens, things can change. I recommend anybody that is trying to sign a lease right now to really, really protect yourself and not to sign any type of long-term lease, right? Now, the other most basic thing that we want to understand here is your lease term, right? So most lease terms are about 5 years with an option to renew for another 5 years. I've done leases where it's 2 years or 3 years with shorter options of 2 to 3 years. You may see some lease terms that are 10 years with an option to renew for 10 years. I personally like to do only 5 years. 5 years is a long time with an option to renew for another at least 5-year term. Sometimes I'll structure in multiple 5-year terms. For example, if I sign a lease today and it's 2020, my term ends in 2025. In 2025, I have the option to renew for another 5 years until 2030. In 2030, I can do the same thing. So depending on what your situation is, and if you're going to sign a lease now, I would recommend trying to get creative and signing way shorter lease terms. Okay. Right. So look through your lease and really understand how long your lease term is, and understand a difference between the lease commencement and rent commencement. Right. So usually the landlord will give you 4 months free rent or 3 months free rent. And that's for your construction, your permits, your build out to get open. Right. So you sign the lease on a certain date. It could be March 1st, 2020. Right. And that's the lease commencement. The rent commences 4 months after that, if that was negotiated in. So that means that you have 4 months to open from March 1st. Right. And then you have to open by March, April, May, June, July 1st. July 1st is when you have to start paying rent. So understand the difference between lease commencement and rent commencement. And usually if you have a 5-year term, you're paying rent in July from that rent commencement date. So that's when you start paying. The other thing that's worth mentioning is your annual increases. So every year, your base rent usually should increase by an amount between 2 to 3% is common. That's what I usually see in commercial leases. That can be negotiated. 3% is usually common and what you see in most leases. I usually try to negotiate at 1%, and a lot of times the landlords will meet in the middle at 2%. Right, so you should have some type of calculator or Excel document that shows your base rent and what those annual increases look like. Now, you also have to understand when those annual increases will go into effect. It may not be the fiscal year, meaning that January 1st your rent increases. It could be 12 months from the rent commencement date, right? So if you signed your lease July 1st, 2020, your base rent may go up July 1st, 2021. Now, the other thing you want to take a look at is the breakdown of base rent versus your CAM, right? Your common area maintenance. Generally speaking, common area maintenance will include things like keeping the plaza clean, keeping your store clean, maintenance, snow removal, trash removal, that stuff. So take a look at what your lease covers. And, you want to make sure that your CAM isn't crazy or out of control. I've seen leases where the CAM is just so high, and also CAM could include taxes. So that is something so important. Understand your taxes, right? How much taxes you're paying. A lot of times if you're part of a plaza and you're a certain amount of square feet, let's say your space is 2,000 square feet and the plaza is 20,000 square feet, you should probably be responsible for about 10% of the entire plaza, right? The math makes sense there. So you're paying about 10% of CAM and 10% of taxes. Now, there can be a scenario where taxes increase by a lot. And that not just affects you, that affects the landlord and every other tenant in the space. And you can get into a situation where your taxes almost double, increasing your real estate and your rent by a lot. We had a situation where the taxes were high in one of our cities in New Jersey, and the taxes increased, I think, by from $500 to $1,000 a month. It's pretty crazy. So that can really impact your ability to pay rent and what your financials and economics look like. So really understand the breakdown of your CAM, your taxes, and your base rent. Almost all of the time, just the base rent is negotiable. The CAM is almost never negotiable. I don't think I've ever done a deal where I've negotiated CAM. So understand what that breakdown looks like and how you can negotiate the base rent. And this is going to apply to any type of agreement or negotiation that you do, impacting COVID, right? If you, let's say, are able to negotiate 50% off rent, it is most likely going to be off of base rent and not the entire amount. For example, I was able to successfully negotiate 12 months starting September 1st, 2020 of 50% off of rent for 12 months. But that is only base rent. That does not include my CAM. So the way that my rent breaks down, it's about $5,000 a month. I believe it's $4,000 in base rent and $1,000 in CAM. So that 50% off will only affect my base rent. So 50% of $4,000 is $2,000 a month. You add the CAM back on of $1,000, I'm left with $3,000 a month to pay, which is still a good deal. But when you do the math, $3,000 out of $5,000, it's really about it's a little bit more than 60%, right? So I'm saving 40%, and it's still a good deal. So understand the breakdown of your base rent versus your CAM. The other thing you want to look at, obviously, is your square footage. Your square footage affects everything that we just discussed, your base rent, your CAM, and your taxes. Know what that amount is. And if you're ever uncertain, usually a lot of times commercial leases will have clauses where you can remeasure the space. You can remeasure how big your space actually is. And what does it include? Does it include a basement, right? So understand, if you think you're paying too much, look in your lease to see if there's a clause that you can remeasure the space out. Okay. The last thing here for the most basic aspects of a lease is your security deposit. A lot of times, especially in New Jersey, you're paying about 2 months rent. I've done leases where I paid 1 month rent. Um, Unless it's a really big company or a really big public company, they may ask for a huge amount, like 6 months or so, to really protect themselves. And a lot of times, the security deposit depends on your history as a tenant and how long your tenure is as a business, right? So, if you're a brand new business and you don't have any history and you're an independent, meaning that you're a new concept, you never had a concept in the past, most likely you're going to have to pay a full amount of security deposit. And this is so that the landlord can protect themselves. And they're going to ask for a personal guarantee. And we're going to get into that shortly. So again, make sure that you understand all of these basic terms in your lease. I would highly recommend writing them down. Put together an Excel sheet or a Word document. Write them all down somewhere so you completely understand what the terms are of your lease. A lot of times when you go into that commercial real estate negotiation, the first step is submitting an LOI or letter of intent, right? So your broker or your attorney will submit that LOI to the landlord, and it will break down. It's usually 1 or 2 pages. It breaks down every single thing that we just talked about. It summarizes all of these basic terms, and you go back and forth and you negotiate. Once these terms are agreed upon, you're going to go into the next step, which is actually negotiating the lease. And that's when the attorneys jump in there, and you should have your own commercial real estate attorney. The landlord will always have an attorney, and they'll go back and forth on the fine details and the actual lease, which could be 20 to 100 pages. They'll go back and forth on the red line. So a lot of times I see what's negotiated in the LOI really doesn't matter because it really depends on what is in the actual lease. So dig up your paperwork, dig up your LOIs, dig up your leases, have it somewhere handy, print it out, highlight it, and make sure that you're writing down all these terms and you understand it and you know it. So, in this segment, we're going to discuss the basic principles of negotiation, right? And for those of you out there that don't have a lot of negotiation skills and really want to learn, I can tell you that negotiation is so important, not just in sales. If you're a business owner, everything is a negotiation, right? If you're buying food from your vendors, you need to be able to negotiate prices, okay? Um, Negotiating your rent with your landlord is a big item to negotiate and discuss. So I highly recommend a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who is an FBI hostage negotiator. And he teaches a lot about how to negotiate with the other party, where really what you're trying to do is create a mutually beneficial outcome or solution, right? You have to put yourself in the other party's shoes and understand what they're looking at. Don't ever look at negotiation as just trying to get the best deal or trying to get the best number. You'll always lose. I see a lot of salespeople that work on commission. All they care about is getting the best sale and making their money in commission, whereas the best salespeople that I've ever met, the best negotiators, are the ones that are trying to get the best outcome, not just for themselves, but for the other party, or even if there's a third party involved, right? That's a win-win situation. Because when you're not just thinking about yourself, not only is it greedy, when you're thinking about the other party, everyone's winning. And what that does is it creates a situation where everything is positive and it may open up doors and opportunities in the future. So, the first thing to look at when you're negotiating here is understanding what the other party wants, how to get there, and understanding what you want or what your client wants, right? And finding out if there's a way where everybody can win. Now, if everybody cannot win, is there a way to meet in the middle? Is there a way to be creative? That's another thing that you don't see a lot in negotiations, or where you think a deal has to be black and white, right? That there's only two outcomes. That there's yes or no. There's the deal will be had, or the deal will be done, or the deal won't be done. There's no deal, right? Let's look at other solutions where we can be creative. We can create alternative solutions, and I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs miss in the art of negotiation is being super creative here and figuring out a way to get to a deal. And a lot of this is mindset. A lot of this is saying to yourself, I'm going to get a deal done no matter what. And it's not about forcing the deal or trying to be a bully or pressuring or doing whatever it takes to get this deal done. It's really understanding the other party and working with the other party in order to create a solution that works for everybody. And this is super, super important to understand in this situation right now with restaurants. For a lot of these deals that I'm getting done, especially with my landlords, you really, really have to understand their situation. We are now 6, 7 months into this pandemic, right? There's been a lot of defaults. If you defaulted on your landlord, you're not paying your rent, or you're being advised to not pay your rent, think about the situation that the landlord's in as well. They're probably in a really bad situation. And from a lot of the information that I gather, a lot of the articles that I've written, a lot of my conversations with different landlords, my own personal landlords, I'm dealing with, about a dozen. I'm helping my franchisees negotiate with their landlords, and also friends negotiate. Landlords are in bad shape, right? They are being defaulted on. They're not able to collect their rent. And do you think they're getting any type of relief or forbearance from the banks or the mortgage companies? No. This is a problem. This is a disaster where these landlords can't collect rents, and if they can't collect rents, they can't pay their bills as well, and they're not getting any type of relief. So the fact that the landlord is willing to cut some type of deal and offer you a relief, you need to think about that. Think about if you were the landlord and you own the plaza, and your rent roll, what you're collecting per month is, let's say, $100,000 in rents between 20 tenants. Okay. And every month you got to pay your mortgage, real estate taxes, common area maintenance. Maybe it's $80,000, $85,000 a month. Okay. So if you're the landlord during a good economic period, you're netting or profiting about 15,000 a month. All right. Now, some of the numbers that I'm seeing is that landlords are able to collect 70 to 60 to even 50% of their rent roll. So, and it's probably worse in a lot of scenarios. So let's think about the landlord that's only able to collect 50% of the rent roll. In this scenario, instead of collecting 100,000, they're able to collect successfully 50,000 a month. And as time goes on, it's probably less and less and less as places go out of business or they fold. So the situation is getting worse. As time goes on, landlords are getting into a worse situation. And now think about that. If they are only able to collect 50,000 and their expenses are 85,000 a month, they're basically getting smoked. They're losing about $35,000 a month there. And they're not getting the forbearance, and it's not the same situation with you as a tenant where you can just kind of hold off from paying your landlord. Not to saying that you should, and again, you should talk to an attorney or counsel about this, um, but you have time to negotiate here. The other alternative is your landlord can evict you and then take you to court and sue you for damages if you have a personal guarantee. That whole process will take a lot of time. And because this is happening to every tenant and landlord, the courts are backed up. And you have to check your local municipality and your court system. But a lot of court systems are backed up. So in a negotiation, that kind of works in your favor. And you got to think about
the scenario here. As time goes on, the landlords hurt more and more, and unfortunately, you're hurting too. So they are kind of forced to cut a deal with you. They have no other option. In order for them to survive long term, they need to be creative and help you survive. Because if you don't, you fold, and other tenants start to fold, the entire system collapses. The landlord cannot pay their liabilities, they cannot pay their expenses, their CAM, their real estate taxes, and then what happens? Then the banks and financial institutions are in trouble. And I really think that's when Congress and the government kicks in and kind of bails them out, where the tenants and the landlords are being put in the situation where there's no help towards us, right? And then of course there's loans and there's aid for renters and some for landlords, but you know for the long-term viability of everybody, really a negotiation needs to be done, and the landlord has to be willing to work with the tenant and vice versa. And both parties need to understand that we're in such unprecedented times that everything can change at any given moment. There can be a lockdown tomorrow, or your sales can dramatically drop, and whatever you agreed to in the past is subject to change maybe in the future. And this is a problem. This is something that everybody needs to understand.
So, for those of you listening, I want to reiterate that I am not an attorney. If you are engaging in any type of landlord negotiation with your existing landlord, you should retain your own counsel. Get a really good attorney that understands this stuff. This is going on between almost every commercial real estate, commercial tenant and landlord right now. So there's a lot of good attorneys out there. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I will go over a lot of my personal experience and a lot of, dealing with and signing over 30 commercial leases over the past 5 years and negotiating with 15 plus different landlords in the past 6 months or so. So I can definitely tell you that I've learned a lot. And again, if you are going to negotiate with your own landlord and cut any type of legal deal, I highly urge you to get your own counsel and hire an attorney. If you have any inquiries at all, feel free to reach out to us at info@restaurantinnovation.com. Again, that's info@restaurantinnovation.com. And check out our website, restaurantinnovation.com, where you can find all the latest and greatest software and apps and point of sales related to restaurant. And we're actually working on a restaurant innovation university, which we're really excited about. One of the first courses that we're working on is an Uber Eats masterclass. We've gotten a lot of requests about this, where a lot of restaurants have pivoted and have shifted towards third-party delivery, whether it be DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats. And we plan on rolling out with this course by the end of the year. So stay tuned. If you have any questions about it, let us know. Again, and thanks for listening.